to have your face show for our speakers' sake, that would be great. If you can't, maybe even just a picture of you instead of just a name, so we can at least feel some human connection here. So welcome tonight. I'm Ellen Schwartz. I'm the coordinator for the Bergen County chapter of CHAD. And we have, where's our announcement?
They're coming right up.
Thanks. So we offer education and support to people, not just in Bergen County, but all over. And what we have is a speaker series that's the first Monday of every month, except for August. In June, we're going to have Get Ready for Summer with Nikki Kinzer, who's a fabulous speaker and coach. And July, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to have an open Q&A that Joni, Andrea, and I will run. I don't know who else might join us. But it's a chance for you to just ask some of those questions that maybe it feels too formal or uncomfortable, or maybe the theme of one of our speakers isn't quite what you really need to talk about. So we're going to open that up for July. On a monthly basis, we have a variety of offerings. We have three different support groups. We have a support group for adults with ADHD, and that meets the third Monday of every month. That's run by Isabel Ibrahimi. And on the second Wednesday of every month, Joni runs a group for parents of kids who are pre-K through sixth grade. And on the fourth Wednesday of every month, she runs a group for seventh grade and older, for parents of older kids. We also ask that you check out our website, bergencountychad.com, and also, if you want to make a donation, you can make it through CHAD or buy me a cup of coffee, which if you just type in buy me a cup of coffee, or you go onto our website, I think you'll find it there. So I want to start by introducing tonight's speaker, if I can find, yes. So we are delighted. We've been wanting to have Jodi Gold talk to us for quite some time. She's a board certified adult and pediatric psychiatrist who led the adolescent and psychiatry and outpatient department at Weill, Cornell College of Medicine for 6 years. And she's the author of Screen Smart Parenting. And she's also a nationally recognized expert in parenting in the digital age. Dr. Gold will bring together scientific knowledge and everyday practical advice to help parents and educators foster a healthy relationship with technology. She will tell us what parents and educators need to know about social media and the digital landscape. Jodi, you're amazing. Come on, we're ready. We're going to switch screens. Anybody, before we start, if anybody has any questions, when you think of it, put it into the chat. At 9 o'clock, we're going to wind up, and then we'll have a chance to answer. Jodi will answer your questions. Or should I be calling you Dr. Gold? What do you like?
Jodi's great.
Okay. All right. So Jodi, you can take over the screen.
Hi, I'm Jodi Gold. It's nice to meet you all. I'm going to share my screen so you can see it. And then you can now see your application. Okay. Can you all, everyone can see that?
Yep, we got it.
Awesome. So I'm Jodi Gold. It's nice to meet you all. As they were saying, I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and I got involved with thinking about how to manage technology and parenting actually quite a while ago, almost 10 years ago now. And the reason I got involved was because I was going to work every day and seeing teenagers and young adults who were struggling with online dating and video games. It was like every session was a different device question. And then I went home, and these are my 3 kids, and they were little, they're bigger now, but they were little then. And they had sort of different challenges, like when to give them a phone and if you should learn to read online. And so like a good doctor, I was like, you know what, let me check out how to raise my kids online. Let me just Google it. So I Googled it, and in that moment, I actually even went to the library and looked for books. And you guys won't be surprised. I literally found nothing, like virtually nothing evidence-based on how to raise your kids in the digital age. And that's when I sort of got involved with this idea of talking to people and doing some research. So today I'm hoping not to scare you, but I'm hoping to sort of help you be thoughtful and think about how to navigate this with your children. But I'm going to start by scaring you. So I'll start with the scary statistics. So your child will spend more time on their devices than sleeping, eating, going to school with, or spending time with family and friends. And that's not a question, that's actually just a fact today. So that's why it's so important to think about, and why it's so important that you're here tonight to think about how to raise your kids online. And the questions that I actually want you to think about today is, what type of person are you raising? Because you're going to be raising your child online just the way you've raised them offline. So basically, I'm going to ask you to think about who you are as a parent. And it's a little bit even more challenging for parents of kids with ADHD. But I want you to think about what type of parent you're raising. What type of person you're raising. And that's the kind of person that you're going to be needing to raise online, because you're raising them both online and offline. So my goal for today is I take a developmental approach, which means that I do not think everything fits for everybody, and that you want to think about, like, you shouldn't be worrying about Twitter if you have a 6-year-old, you shouldn't be worrying about Grindr necessarily if you have a 13-year-old. It's really about taking a developmental approach. And what I will say for kids with ADHD is that often that means that they're a couple of years behind where you think they would be. And this really matters when you're raising your kids on technology, thinking about not just where a 13-year-old should be, but where your 13-year-old is. And it may be you need to think about where 11 or 12-year-old is. I'm going to try to overview the research and trends. I'm going to talk a lot about digital citizenship and resilience, because that's kind of the goal, what we're trying to do, and try to give you some tools for self-regulation and identity development. Because at the end of the day, we need our kids to be regulated, and they're going to develop their identities online. So we just need to be thinking about these kinds of questions. So I'm going to break this down into 3 parts. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to hone in on your parenting style and family culture. And then we're going to try to understand the digital landscape in 20 minutes. And then we're going to try to end with coming up with a plan. So we have very small goals for tonight. So first, step 1, the first thing you need to do is to identify your parenting style and technology diet. Parents today are the last generation of digital immigrants. We are the last generation of parents and educators and clinicians that are raising their kids not having been raised completely online ourselves. Your children and your grandchildren will still be in a brave new world where there's Jetsons, people flying around. It'll be something we can't even think of, but they'll have had the experience of growing up online. And so they'll bring to it a different understanding than we may. What I like to think about it is that we speak technology with an accent, and that with that comes a lot of fear. Just like sometimes first generation immigrants are nervous about they want their kids to engage in the new world, but they also want to hold on to their ideals. The same thing holds true when you're raising your kids on technology. I don't know about you all, but I still like the newspaper. I actually still get the New York Times, at least on the weekend. Often I don't read it, but I love the idea of holding paper and reading books. I still like that. But I understand that my kids actually they go seamlessly from online to offline without making a distinction. And there's actually probably no inherent extra value to my paper books versus their digital books. But that's sort of the generational gap that's going on here, is that I'm still a little bit fearful of the sort of new world where my kids just very seamlessly go back and forth between online and offline. I think this is a super important thing to understand, because this right here is where all the conflict comes in. There is a ton of conflict about raising your kids online, whether to take the phone away or not to take the phone away. There's actually an increase in ER visits in the last 7 or 8 years of kids becoming suicidal because their parents took the phone away. No joke, that's real. So it's a real issue and a lot of that comes from parental fear. This fear that, what happens if we let our kids be online too early. So we really need to think about this as someone who speaks technology with an accent and not be afraid of this new world. After you're not afraid and you've got your passport, the next thing that I encourage people to think about is their own relationship with technology. Because the first rule 101 of parenting is you got to practice with what you preach to some degree, right? If you're on your phone all the time, and you're on your phone in this like picture at dinner, then you really can't expect your kids not to be on their phones. And I don't say this in any judgmental way. That's just the truth. So it's about being honest. If you're somebody that's really not on their phone much, that's not in technology, then you're setting, that's fine. That's an expectation you can have for your kids. If you're someone that needs to be online all the time for their work or for their life, that's fine. But you need to understand what you're sort of modeling for your children and manage your expectations around technology based on who you and your significant other are. So parents of tweens and teens spend at least 9 hours a day with screen media. And almost 80% of parents believe that they're good media role models for their children. So the reality is that parents are online as much or even more than kids are. And it's not, and they believe they're good role models, and they may be good role models, but I think it's really important in parenting always to be honest with who you are if you're going to try to, raise your kids. This is one of I'm going to direct this talk, bring up a very few number of studies that I think are actually research driven and are worth bringing up. There isn't a lot of research out there. This is one that I particularly like. This is from Northwestern, I think, and it's with younger kids, but it really divides families up into media centric, media moderate, and media light. So it's sort of like, who is your family? And then it looks at the parent screen time and the child screen time. So if you look at the media light, the parents are on it for 1 3/4 hours and the child is on it for 1.5. If you look at the media centric parents, the parents are on it for 11 hours and the kids are on it for 4.5 hours. So up until like 8, 9 years of age, children's use of their screens is directly proportional to parental use. Somewhere between 8 and 10 years of age, that becomes unhinged and kids will begin to have their own relationship with technology. It is possible the pandemic, if I was betting, we don't know yet, I would bet that these numbers have gotten a little bit younger because of the pandemic. This research, we don't have any good research on technology, the impact of technology from the pandemic yet. But the take home of this is up until your kids are 8 or 9, you have a lot of control over how much time they're on screens. After that age, approximately, you will begin to lose control for a number of reasons, their own autonomy, the fact they'll be doing things more in school, the fact that they're at other people's houses, at other people's places. So that's really what I want you to think about is sort of your relationship with technology and your kids. Okay, the next thing is, are you afraid? If you were afraid, your child will smell your fear. If there is nothing that you take away tonight, this evening, it is not to be afraid. It's, like puppies. If they know you're afraid, they will smell it and you will not be able to parent around it. You have to address your own fear about technology, whatever it is. If you're fearful of ChatGPT, if you're fearful of Snapchat, if you're fearful of all of it, you've got to manage it or you can't parent your kids. Okay, so now that you've got your passport, your relationship with technology, we need to throw in a little bit about who you and your significant other are in terms of parenting. So sociologists have divided parenting styles into 4 sections. There is laissez-faire, which nobody here is laissez-faire because you would not probably be tuning in at 8 o'clock on Monday if you were a laissez-faire parent. There is authoritarian, which are people that have lots of technology rules, and lots of rules in general, but have a little bit of a hard time customizing things for each of their children. Permissive parents, on the other hand, are very good at understanding each of their own children's special needs, but sometimes are hard with implementing the sort of rules and consistency. And then, of course, hint, 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 there is authoritative parenting. And authoritative parenting is what we're all trying to be. We're all aspiring to it anyway. It's sort of balancing the flexibility of what your specific child needs with the fact that there needs to be rules and consistency. And that's what we're going for. And the reason that we're going for authoritative parenting is there is lots of good research that goes beyond technology, but also with technology that says kids who grow up with parents who are authoritative see if I can get this all right. They have less obesity, they have less metabolic problems, they do better in school, they have higher self-esteem, they have more confidence and well-relatedness and higher levels of resilience. So yeah, our goal really is to try to be authoritative parents. And that means not just offline, it means online. It means the goal is to be flexible, and especially if you have ADHD kids, to understand their needs and balance it with the fact that there needs to be rules and regulations and limits. So before I move on to step 2, what I'm trying to bring home to you all is you cannot be afraid. You need to understand your own technology, your own relationship with technology, and you need to understand your own parenting style. And these 3 things are really critical as you develop yourself as a parent raising kids in the digital age. Okay, moving on to step 2, which is understanding the digital landscape and the trends in the research. Obviously, I could spend like 15 hours on this topic, and I wouldn't make much progress. So I'm just highlighting the things that I think are really important and interesting. Okay, this is my favorite. This is not a trend, it's the iPotty. And I do want to say to that, just say no to the iPotty. This is an old slide, but it's from Amazon, and I cannot tell you the thousands and thousands of people that bought the iPotty. So just say no to that. So I'm going to talk about social media to begin with. If I could see you all, I would sort of ask you what you knew about social media. But these are the things that I want you to take home about social media. TikTok is now the most important social media platform for kids. The things that matter for kids are TikTok and Snapchat. And Instagram, and then also YouTube, because whether you know that or not, if your kids are on YouTube or on Minecraft, they are on social media. So often parents of young kids think that their kids are not on social media. Sometimes I ask the crowd, you know, are your kids on social media or not? But if your children are on YouTube or Minecraft, they're on a social media platform. It's just not what we think of as a social media platform. You can follow things, you can share things, you can't always control the content that's coming in. So at a very young age, our kids are really on social media, which is not bad. It's just a matter of understanding it. I also think of social media in a developmental way. It generally starts now with TikTok and Snapchat. I'm also going to talk about Be Real. And it evolves into Instagram and sort of Facebook and Twitter. I mean, Facebook is pretty irrelevant for kids. It has some very unique, you know, like when you're applying to college, sometimes you now need a Facebook, but even that's becoming obsolete. And Twitter is less interesting to kids under teenagers and middle schoolers. And it's usually something that kids get into sort of later. So I don't hear 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th graders caring about Twitter. They really care about TikTok and Snapchat. The other things that are on here are Facebook, Discord, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. So I want to talk about TikTok so that people can think about it. Again, I don't have this answer to, I used to love TikTok. When it was Musical.ly years ago, it was about sharing music videos. And I actually used to say, oh, it's such a great way to collaboratively make videos and share them. I would not really say that. I would not say that now. I would say TikTok has gotten out of control. But it is the most popular for teens. You do need to, if your kids are not on it, what I'd like to say about the social media in general is do not put your kids on social media platforms before they ask. I don't think that's really a problem, but there's no need to push kids onto platforms they're not ready. You basically want them to be begging for it before you give it to them. Having said that, the value of them being on it younger, and I really mean that in middle school, is that you're able to sort of be on it collaboratively with them and help them to use social media. Because I need to be clear, social media is not going anywhere, and restricting it, setting limits is very important, but at the end of the day, we really want our kids to make mistakes on social media while they're still young and while you're still monitoring and with them so that you can help them. It's kind of like the skin knee concept. We need them to fall off their bike and skin their knee on social media while you're still involved so that you can help them become resilient. Otherwise, they're on their own without you. So think about that as you allow your kids to be on or not on social media. And to be honest with you, so many kids are on it and you guys don't even know if they're on it or not. So I just want to talk a minute about TikTok. It is most popular for teens. It's got 30% of the market share, 1 billion daily users. It's just an enormous amount. I think it's kind of like crack. It does have a digital well-being setting that you should know about. So there is an ability to limit the time and to limit the content a little bit if you know how to set it up. I get mixed views on how effective that is, but it's something to know about. I want to talk a little bit about Snapchat. If you don't, I think the Snapchat people are the most brilliant people. I didn't say not necessarily best people, but the most brilliant people. They really seem to have their pulse more than anybody else on understanding what middle schoolers and teenagers want. They really got it. They really understood how kids communicate. If you're not familiar, you take a picture and you send it to a friend, and the picture disappears. The reason this is so brilliant, and as I'm talking a lot about the generation gap today, I think the generation gap is really, really the most noticeable in Snapchat. Because if I was taking a picture and I was going to send it to you all, I would take a picture and I would probably put on lipstick and fix my hair up, and I would take a picture. And if it was a really ugly picture, I would probably delete it and take another picture, right? And then I would send you all that picture. And you would say, oh, wow, that's a pretty picture of Jodi. And maybe if you're my mother, my sister, whatever, you would keep it in your camera roll, and that would be really lovely, right? But that's me, right? I'm a grown. If you're a 12-year-old girl and you wake up in the morning and you feel horrible and your hair is a mess and you look disgusting, then you take a picture of yourself, the most ugliest picture you've ever heard of, right? And you send it to all of your best friends, who then open up this picture and they're like, oh, I guess Jodi's having a bad day. I'll have to give her a hug when I see her. And then it disappears, right? So the difference is that I wasn't using that picture to communicate anything. I was sending an archival photograph, right? Kids today really communicate not like it's kind of cool and sophisticated in a way that our generation isn't as much. They're communicating through pictures, music, emojis, tweets. It's very multifaceted, including pictures. So there's a component of Snapchat that's brilliant. It allows you to communicate without words with your friends. That's the brilliant part. We all know the sort of not brilliant part, where you can actually take screenshots and share them, and they don't really disappear. And I think we kind of all understand that none of the pictures truly disappear. The other thing I took this slide out, but I should have put it back in. The other topic on Snapchat I want you to be aware of is that if you don't know what a streak is, you should ask your kids what Snapchat streaks are. They're really important in terms of like confidence and bullying. So what happens is that if I am Snapchatting with you and I Snapchat every day and you send a picture back to me for 10 days, we have a streak of 10. And what happens is there's a hierarchy of your friends with how long your streaks are, which is fine and lovely in some ways. In some ways, it's a nice way to stay connected. The part that's a problem is that when your mom takes away your phone because, I don't know, because she wants you to spend quality time with her outside, you then lose all of your streaks. So this person that you've had a 35-day streak with, a 350-day streak with, all of a sudden the 350-day streak is gone. And you may not think that's a big deal, and maybe it's not, and it may not be that big of a deal for your child, but it also might be a big deal because all of a sudden the streak is gone and they're not on your child is no longer on the top of their streak lists. So again, do I think it's the end of the world that streaks end? No, of course I don't. But do I think that it might be a big deal for your kids? And it's just something to be thoughtful when you're taking away the phone, is that you may not, when you take away the phone to spend quality time, your intention may not be for them to lose all of their streaks. So these are the kinds of questions. One of the things I want you to take away from today is that you need to go home and find out what your kids are doing. And especially if you have kids with ADHD, this is where they get into the most amount of trouble. Like on a Snapchat where they can be very impulsive and send all kinds of things. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be on this social media. They probably should be. They just need you talking to them about their streaks and the pictures that they're sending. And as of today, you should talk to them about what Snapchat did in the last, I don't know, couple of weeks. I think it's in the last couple of weeks, which is they've launched My AI. I don't really have a lot to say about it other than I want to bring it to everyone's attention in terms of the trends. This is Chat GPT on Snapchat. So now all of your children have this, whether you know or not, if they're on Snapchat, and you, if you've got a Snapchat. So every single Snapchat user has their own chat bot. I don't know. I don't want to make any statements about it because I don't know how I feel about it yet, to be honest. It's too new, but you can give it a name. And you can give it an avatar, and it's meant to be your AI. So on some level, it's kind of super creepy. On other levels, it could be really supportive. I set up the chat bot with my daughter, and it did ask questions about how she was feeling and wanted to see an art project that she had done. So I really don't know what to say about it. It makes me nervous, but I don't know, once again, if that's my digital immigrant piece, being nervous. But you do, I looked it up, you can get rid of it, but you do have to pay Snapchat to get rid of it, which is ironic. So I'm bringing this up just so that you guys, I'm interested in what you think about it. But just again, kids with ADHD, I don't know the kind of questions they're going to ask. A couple of other things, this is more just because I want you to have a sense of what's out there in terms of social media. Be real. I would say at this moment, it's a little bit bigger. It's a newer social media platform that you may or may not have heard of. I would say that it's really trendy with college kids. It was really trendy in middle school and high school. It feels like it's less so. It's an interesting concept. I don't know if it's better or worse than anything else, but you take a picture of yourself once a day. You take a front picture and a back picture, and you get a notification of when to take it. So the idea is that you can't filter. It's supposed to be an authentic picture of where you are, and then you can send it to your friends, and it is pretty closed. I think there's ways to share things, but it's not one of these big sharing kind of platforms. Lots of people think it's a good alternative to Snapchat. I don't know if it's getting that much traction, but it's a really interesting sort of counterpoint to Snapchat. And it's been your kids that are in high school or college, they would be familiar with it. So I just want you to have heard of it, because I think the more you know about all this, the easier it is to have conversations with your kids. The other thing I'm just throwing out there in terms of trends, this is an older trend, but I don't know, I think you all might not have heard of it so much, and that's Discord. This is more popular with the boys. This is basically the way kids talk when they're on video games, but now you can actually talk on about anything you want online with Discord. It's basically the next generation of how kids play video games. So when your kids are playing video games with other people, they may be talking on Discord. So in some ways I like it, because again, it's a collaborative way. It is seriously a way that kids are social now, more boys than girls, but girls as well. It is when they're in their room talking to people, there's a good chance they're talking on Discord. So ask your kids about it. So those were just my sort of highlights in terms of thinking about different social media platforms and being aware of what's out there and what's important, and knowing what your kids are doing. Because one of the things I'm really always struck by is if I ask a parent what the soccer schedule is or the ballet schedule is, they're always very good at telling me, soccer's Tuesday, Thursday, 3:30, they know it off the top of their head. And then when I say to a parent, so tell me, which social media platform are you on? What games are they playing? What's on their phone? Most of the time, parents, super educated, sophisticated parents, just go blank. Well, I don't know what they're doing on there. And that's one of the things that I want you to leave today thinking about, especially if you have a child with ADHD. You need to know, I'm not saying they're doing anything bad or good. It's not about that. It's about taking an interest in what they're doing. We take an interest in their sports, and we take an interest in their school and their music. You also have to take an interest in what they're doing online. So you should understand what social media they're on or want to be on and why, and what games they're playing and why. You'll get you're going to get a real entree into their psychological inner life by just understanding what games they're playing. Okay, so I want to move on to talking a little bit. I know people wanted me to talk a little bit about the pandemic in terms of post-pandemic parenting. Again, in terms of the research that's out there, we don't know yet about the impact of the pandemic, but I think we can all kind of have a sense of it. One of the things that I was most struck by is the unprecedented amount of device use. It was crazy, right? Everybody who was trying to restrict the devices, or at least have their kids have a slow entry onto the digital world. Yeah, that was over when the pandemic started. And I think most parents have felt it's very hard to backstep. They bought the iPad for the 4th grader. They let the 7th grader get on TikTok. And now you can't really roll it back. So now we are in over our head in terms of the devices. Again, I don't honestly think there's a way to roll it back. I think it's just we've got to parent around it and teach around it. The other pieces that I found in terms of technology, in terms of the impact of the pandemic, is it was wonderful for kids finding ways to connect online. I do think that what the pandemic did is that we all found ways on social media and on video games, depending on who you were, on how to connect. So I think that for whatever's good about all of it, I do think the kids and some adults really know how to connect around social media and video games. What else? More online connections, an increase in dependence. One of the other pieces that I want to say about the pandemic in terms of mental health is that from my perspective, there's unquestionably an increase in depression and anxiety in the pandemic and in re-entry. But one of the things, the gifts that came out of it, that some of it has to do with technology, is that there was a decrease in stigma around mental health. So one of the things that I've seen is, not saying that mental health isn't on the rise. Of course it is. We've seen increases in suicidality, depression, and anxiety. But at the same time, the stigma is really, really dropping fast. In fact, this is another place which I didn't expect that there would be such a generational gap, but there is. And I hate giving any kudos to TikTok, so I am not giving kudos to TikTok. But I will say that, in fact, I might even say they went too far. But I will say that TikTok really opened up some dialogue around mental health. So
God, it's not so bad.
Everyone hear me? So what I would say, I mean, we all know the gloom and doom of the pandemic impact, but in terms of the silver lining, I find that kids 9th, 10th grade and under really have very little stigma about mental health at this point, and they get a lot of their information on social media, which is where you as parents need to play a role. Once again, if you're not parenting your kids around technology, then you're letting TikTok parent your kids. So it's great that they'll learn all about psychiatric medications and all about the symptoms of ADHD and from TikTok, which in some ways is okay, because it gives you an opening for dialogue, but we need to use it as an opening for dialogue. Otherwise, TikTok is raising your kids. Now I want to talk very simply about what the research tells us. It's sort of simplistic, and there's still so much growth. We still don't have a lot of great research. Digital technology does interfere with sleep, but it does not directly cause sleep disturbances. So one of the things that's been borne out in the research, it's not so much that, like, yes, there's some the blue light and some not using your phone before you go to sleep. I'm telling you that research is really hard to parse out and isn't all good research. What is very clear about the research is that your phone interferes or displaces sleep. So if you're on your phone, you're not sleeping, right? Or if you're waking, if your phone is beeping in the middle of the night, then it's waking you up. The other thing that's borne out, and this actually comes from the Sesame Street, from the first media research that existed in the US, really, which was around Sesame Street, and has been borne out for the last 50 years. Co-engagement increases the likelihood that your child will reap the benefits, not the dangers of digital technology. What that means is, if you're playing a game with your child or watching a TV show, and you're able to talk to them about it, they're able to get some of the benefits, right? If you go on the NASA space station website, which is really cool, and interact with the astronauts in space with your child, they're getting much more connection than if they're doing it by themselves. Now, that is not to say that you can be online with your kids all the time. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying here is that the research really shows out. I mean, it comes from Sesame Street, where the idea was to watch with your child, and it still is true in 2023. Play Candy Crush with your child, go on TikTok with your child. That kind of co-engagement allows them to learn and grow from the technology. So this is, the research is about having a TV in the bedroom, but I've kind of, what's the word? Grown it out to be having devices in your bed and in your bedroom, okay? Because this research is so good that it hasn't really been repeated. Basically, one of the problems with having all the devices in your bedroom, such as a TV or any type of device, is that it is correlated with obesity, metabolic abnormalities, poor academic performance, and low self-esteem and fewer friends. So that's about getting your kids out of bed and out, and out of their room. This is important in terms of understanding the research, because one of the things that I do want you to leave with today is an understanding of what we do know in the research, because mostly we don't know anything in the research. So there's just a few things we do know. One of the things we know is that, like, devices and shows do not globally interfere with, like, you're not dumber because you're on them. It doesn't really delay academic growth. Having said that, excessive TV, which would be any screens at this point, with very young children under 3 can interfere with language development, but really only under 3. And that is really because children under 3 need their reciprocity. The way they learn to speak and interact is to have other people that are interacting with them. So if it's just a passive one-way kind of interaction, it can interfere. But only up till the age of 3. After the age of 3, there's no convincing research that it interferes. Actually, digital technology in moderation probably improves cognitive ability in school-age children. And there's a certain number of decent studies. I'm only talking about studies that I reviewed that are actually decent studies that show that it can actually help with cognitive ability. The research on social and emotional development are really interesting, in my opinion. The thing I think is the coolest is that digital technology has offered new avenues for imaginative play in older children. So basically, as you all know, when kids are children, they play, they play house, they play doctor. And then at some stage in middle school or late elementary school, it all of a sudden becomes not socially appropriate anymore. And they put all of that like imaginative play away. And it kind of, in previous generations, which is gone, right? You didn't imagine it, you didn't play anymore, but not in this world today. Now what happens is that when you put the costumes and the imaginary play away, then there's a whole world of imaginary play online that is completely acceptable, from sort of the cross-dressing and role playing to the really intense Minecraft to the RPGs, to like, there's just so many enormous ways to be creative and to play online. So for me, I know that we feel like our kids don't play enough in real life, which I think is true, but our older kids have an opportunity to play online in ways that they never did before. So I think that's a cool thing to know. The big take home today about the research is that, and this goes across everything on social media, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And this is, I'm going to stop for a moment and really talk about ADHD here for a moment, because this could not be any more important when we're talking about kids with ADHD. So what the slide says is selective self-presentation can cultivate positive identity development. What that means is selective self-presentation is basically your profile, how you present yourself, whether you're older and it's on Facebook or it's on Snapchat or it's on Roblox, how you present yourself. Actually, there's studies showing that when, these are Facebook studies, when people were allowed to modify their Facebook profile versus people that were not allowed to, they actually scored higher on positive self-esteem issues because they could control the way they were presenting themselves. So people that are able to control the way they present themselves, it actually makes you more confident, which is wonderful. The problem with that is, and this is the ADHD problem, is the poor get poorer. So kids who seek excessive reassurance online often get negative feedback. So, and this is really what I see as the biggest problem for kids with ADHD online. And it's sort of where the impulsivity or the poor social skills or the annoying behavior kicks in, is that if you're annoying online, however that's defined, then you're much more likely to get hate, as it's called, and you're much more likely to experience cyberbullying and actually to get all the negative and to feel left out and to feel alienated. And this is also where parents have to come in here, because if you have a child with ADHD in particular, you have to be even more important in helping them understand how not to be impulsive and how to be thoughtful about how they post. Otherwise, they are much more likely, and the research supports this, are much more likely to get negative feedback or to get bullied. So this research is a double-sided, right? The rich get richer. They feel better about themselves, but kids that are impulsive or have poor social skills or anxious often find that they're more alienated online. All right, how am I doing on time? Okay. So that was a little bit of a whirlwind through some of the social media platforms and trends and through some of the research that we can actually say is real evidence-based research. And now I'd like to spend the last part of the talk talking a little bit about developing a plan, which is always tricky. So I wanted to think a little bit about what the actual goals of your plan are. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the goals of your plan are not to restrict, because you got to teach your kids, you got to raise your kids on this instead of restricting them. So what are our goals? I think the goals are to build citizenship, to build online resilience and strong identity development. These are my goals for my kids offline. And so these are the goals that I want for my kids and the kids I work with online. So, and also self-regulation, which is a big issue that's come up a lot with kids with ADHD, how to self-regulate. And I think this is where we need to be more involved as parents in helping our kids to self-regulate online. Okay, so it's a lot on the slide, but I wanted to talk a little bit about digital kindness, because I know in the world of mental health, we talk a lot about resilience and stuff, but we don't actually really talk about what that actually means. When I talk about resilience, I like to give actual examples of what I mean. So this is an example of how to teach your kids digital kindness. So, I mean, you all know this intuitively, but are you communicating this with your kids? Like, do delete embarrassing photos, definitely respond to texts or emails requesting help. There's a lot of what I call cyber exclusion that happens. It probably has happened to your kids. It's not bullying, and I don't want to talk about bullying today because I think you all know a good deal of what cyberbullying is. What I don't think we talk enough about is what I call cyber exclusion. And again, it's not bullying, but it's kind of like when you send a text out or a snap out to like 5 friends, can you help me with math? And none of them respond to you. or when you're on a group chat and you get dropped from it, or you're not put on a group chat. The whole group chat thing, that's like, literally, it's the bane of my existence is group chats. Like, I do actually kind of wish they could abolish them, because they're what every third and fourth and seventh and eighth grader dreads, is they're not going to be put on the group chats. So it's about teaching your kids kindness. Kindness is that you include everybody, whatever, in the group chat. Kindness is that if somebody reaches out to you for help, that you respond. Kindness is that you stand up, obviously, for friends that are being bullied. The things that you don't want to do, which again, you think are obvious, but might not be, post party photos on any platform when not everyone is invited. There's just a lot of ways on social media for people to feel excluded. Like, you can be excluded by looking at where your friends are on the Snap Map. If you're not familiar, on Snapchat, you can there's an ability to let all of your friends actually know where you are at all times, which you could argue in some ways is good for safety. But mostly it allows you to see when this group of friends is together and you're not with them, right? Or when you might not be invited. So being really thoughtful about the pictures that you post and who is going to be hurt by seeing the pictures. I have this issue about Instagram, like even just going on Sunday night with my kids and just feeling, it's like they go on to Instagram on Sunday night and you get to basically see all the parties that you weren't invited to. And for those of us older in the crowd, I want to remind you, when we were not invited to parties growing up, like, we didn't really know about them. And the next day, if you ever knew about them, it was like a passing comment, and you would feel like a little bit of a sting for a moment, and then you moved on. Profoundly different than seeing the snaps and the posts on Instagram and on Be Real and the TikToks, and I could go on, right? Of all the ways you can find out that you weren't invited. So again, basically, it means the kids have to be more resilient in managing all of this. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about, we're talking about kindness and resilience. The ways that you could also promote resilience, and this has a lot to do with the whole co-engagement thing in terms of being involved with your kids. And that's about when you're watching shows, talking about what's good and bad, like just even if you're watching YouTube, you're watching TV shows, really having conversations about when people are kind or not kind, or when things are appropriate or not, helping them to sort of sort through that, helping them to challenge stereotypes, distinguish fantasy from reality. It's beyond the time here, I think, but like helping people to really, kids understand the photos and the Photoshop. You can go online and put in, on YouTube, you can put in, I think it's pizza and woman, blonde woman, or woman in a red bikini. And you can see in 60 seconds how Photoshop, they take a blonde woman in a red bathing suit and blonde hair, and they turn, in 60 seconds, they turn her into a pepperoni pizza. It's really actually fun for those of you with younger kids. It's actually kind of fun to go on YouTube. There's a ton of these videos of like turning whatever you can think of, they can turn a person into that on Photoshop. What it teaches your kids is that nothing that you see is real, right? And that it's okay to see something beautiful online, but really I find that the way to talk about beauty is really to talk about it offline, because online it's not real. It could be a piece of pepperoni pizza. So this is about helping your kids. Some of this they're doing in school, but helping them to build resilience. Allow kids to make mistakes online. Don't protect them so much or restrict so much they can't make online. Help them to apologize when they make mistakes. If they do something inappropriate, like I hope all of your kids, it's like the skin knee. We need them to skin their knee. They need to post something just mildly inappropriate, not grossly inappropriate, just mildly inappropriate, so that they can apologize, so they can understand what the impact is. It's the only way you understand like how to build resilience, but also empathy and kindness, the kinds of things that we need to be teaching online. Okay. And identity development. This is a little bit about the Photoshop piece. You have to help your kids to understand your values around friendship, technology, sexuality, and beauty. If you are not talking to your kids about these 4 things, then you are letting, Twitter or Snapchat raise them. Many years ago, I wrote an article for the Washington Post about Kim Kardashian, and the fact that like, if you don't like, this idea that why doesn't everybody want to be Kim Kardashian? This concept of Kim Kardashian is absolutely beautiful and incredibly successful and a great businesswoman. But I have to be honest, I still am not dying for my kids to grow up to be Kim Kardashian. But that is not self-explanatory to kids. Why would you not want to be her? if you want your kids to understand, I'll speak personally, if I want my kids to understand why I might not want them to become famous for sex tapes or for being famous, I actually have to have those conversations with them. Otherwise, what they're seeing online is it's all about the likes, it's all about the followers, it's all about the beauty, the superficial beauty. So I'm really challenging you all to really talk about what friends means in terms of followers, what technology means, and really about sexuality and beauty. There's also some great online videos. Dove, the soap commercial, there's a whole bunch of really beautiful videos if you want to Google them, where they really talk about taking selfies. One of the ways, if you want to understand your child's, especially if you're worried about your daughter's or your son's body image, ask them how they selfie and if they selfie. Like I never worry about kids who post selfies. That's an appropriate thing for their age. I worry about kids who don't post pictures of themselves. Because to me, that's a red flag that there's a body image issue or self-confidence issue. Now, it might not be, they might ethically be opposed to it, and that's all fine. But to me, that begs the question. So I'll often ask kids if they post, and if they post, what do they like about their selfies? How do they post their selfies? If you ask someone how they take a selfie, you learn a lot about what they like and they don't like about their body. I always take it in this angle because I hate my nose, or I'm so fat that I always just take it from behind, or whatever. So I would encourage you to ask your kids if they selfie and how they selfie, and to talk a little bit more about beauty and sexuality, so that you're not just letting online world parent your kids. Okay. And in conclusion, am I on okay time? Oh, yes. In conclusion, I usually like to end with this, which is sort of my cyber bill of rights, which is some general thoughts I have on raising kids on technology. Technology is a privilege, not a right. It's a tool. Your digital footprint begins at birth. Kids learn this in school now, but, and I want to not scare parents about that one as well. I do think the kids' digital footprints are very big and very deep. And so they're really, I know that we all think about, oh my God, what if I'd had social media when I was in college? Like maybe they wouldn't have let me into med school, like I might have gotten in trouble. But I want to say that although they will be able to look at your kids' digital footprint for their whole life, I think they'll be more forgiving, and I think it's going to be a very big footprint. But it still starts at birth. Privacy doesn't exist in cyberspace. You need to talk to your kids about privacy, what it means. And privacy does not mean your best friends on Instagram. Like one of the things that people do is they have smaller groups on Instagram versus bigger groups on Instagram. And just because you're only posting to 6 friends, does not mean that it's more private than if you're posting to 1,000 friends. And it's a confusing concept. So talking about privacy is super important. Be kind online, be an upstander, regulate your own screen time. Obviously I didn't talk about the screen on the phones that you can use to measure, but helping kids. I also encourage parents, if you want your kids to monitor their screen time, like on their phones, maybe you monitor your screen time as well. That's a great way to get kids to do it. Like I'll limit my time I spend on Reddit or whatever. You limit your time on Instagram. Don't share passwords or personal information. Get permission to download. Your kids should be getting permission to download stuff so that you know what's going on. But if they're not, just ask them to take a tour of their phones so you know what's going on. Don't sleep with your phone. That's a big one that I usually talk a lot about. I sometimes call it the eye blankie. At this point, usually what happens is by the time kids give up their blankies or whatever, like in 3rd or 4th or 5th grade, it's about the time they get a phone now. So what's happening is that they were replacing the lovey, or in psychology, we call it transitional object that they have to sleep with, and they're replacing it with a phone. And I will challenge you all that you do not need your phone. Alarm clocks cost like $3.99 at Duane Reade. If I could ask Apple to do one thing, I would ask them to take the alarm clock off of the phone, because that way none of us would be able to say, oh, I have to sleep with my phone because it's got the alarm clock. So I would suggest that many of us, and I'm often guilty myself, that your phone should not be the last thing you touch when you go to sleep and the first thing you touch in the morning. And if it is, think about having a shared charging stations for your family, or having all of your family sleep with their phones in other rooms. Don't sleep with your phone. Create tech-free family times. Again, that's just finding time to be off your devices. You all know that. And last but not least, your digital identity should reflect your true identity. So helping your kids to understand that they can be who they want to be, but their online footprint should reflect who their authentic self is, and helping them to understand that. And with that, I hope you enjoy your family's digital journey. And I know I've talked a lot and I'm sorry, there's just so much to say. I can always keep on going. But I'm going to stop so that we have, oh, we do. So we can have a few minutes for questions if people would like. This is my book. And if this is my center, if you want to reach out to me. So maybe I'll stop sharing right now. Stop sharing. Yeah, cool. All right. And I'm happy to answer questions or have a conversation, or I can elaborate also on any topics that I didn't quite get to.
So there's a question. Rachel, do you want to read your own question? I guess not. So Rachel asks, can you speak about screen time restriction apps? And also, she has a note that it's important to remember it's not about what friend the kid trusts. It's about who the people are that the trusted friend trusts.
Who the people are. Yes, exactly. Yeah, so let me start by talking about restrictions. Again, if you gave me a few more hours, I would have gotten into my whole thing on restrictions. So these are my thoughts on restrictions. Obviously, it really depends on the age of your child, of course. Of course, with young children, you're going to have restrictions. That goes without saying. Having said that, you want to be thoughtful about what the restrictions are. I do like screen time on the phone. I think it's really helpful in terms of limiting what kids are doing on their phone. It also gives you like feedback on how many hours you've been on whatever. I think it's kind of helpful for all of us sometimes. I think that the restriction companies that have all these limiting companies, I have to say, I used to have a section in this talk where I went through all the different companies that had like those restrictions you can put on. I stopped actually talking about that in these talks for a couple of reasons. One is that none of them are great. And two, I found that at the end of the day, once the kids were out of elementary school into middle school, the kids felt that the parents were kind of spying on them. And I also found that kids know how to get around these restrictions really easily, like much easier than you think they are. So I sort of don't love to set up a dynamic with kids where you're like, don't trust them and you're restricting them and then they're lying to you. And I'm sure you all know, like there's all these ways to trick your parents. And you can ask ChatGPT this now and they can explain it to you. There's all these ways to trick your parents where it looks like your screen, like on your computer is like a normal home screen. And then you're playing or doing whatever. And then when your parents walk in the room, you can immediately switch. So it looks like you're on the screens. So what I found in the end is that there's a couple of companies and any of them are fine if you want to try them. But ultimately, you really want to have an open door policy and you want to kind of know what you really want is to have your kids' passwords, know what they're doing online, and try to sort of share the journey with them and try to encourage them not to lie to you. Because I will say by 7th or 8th grade, a lot, if not most kids are lying to their parents. And then in terms of the trusted thing, I'm not sure. I mean, I agree about who you're trusting online. And this is where I do think that if parents know what their kids are doing, parents can get involved here with younger kids in terms of who we trust and who we talk to. Like we shouldn't be talking to strangers. Sometimes on video games and on social media platforms, it's obviously better to start with only allowing to follow friends. I'm not so much about everything should be private. I used to be concerned about who people were playing video games with. I'm now less concerned about it, depending on the age of your kids, of course. But those are also, people that say they're 12-year-old boys playing video games could be 50-year-old men playing video games, of course. So again, you really need your kids coming to you so that you can help vet who they're playing with, who they're talking to.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Catherine, who asks what I think a lot of people may be thinking about. Do you have any guidelines for developmentally per age group of the amount of screen time a kid should have each day?
I only had a nickel for that question. So there's no evidence, just to be clear, I'm going to give you sort of my thoughts and my opinion and tell you sort of what's happened historically. There isn't any evidence because not all screen time is created equal. I can certainly tell you that you should limit the amount of time you're on social media, but if your child is writing the great American novel on some site or learning how to code on Scratch or really building a world on Minecraft, do you want to limit that? Having said that, if they're watching crack TikTok for 6 hours, you certainly want to limit it. So it's really less about how much and what they're doing. I don't know when it was, 2015, 2014, Academy of Pediatrics came out with something that was like what was it? It was like, we think your kids should be on for an hour a day. And that the outrage on that was incredible, because now every single parent in America was breaking the Academy of Pediatrics like recommendations. It was actually crazy when that happened. And so the Academy of Pediatrics and the Academy of Child Psychiatry have all come out. Everyone's moved away from prescriptive times. Giving your kids some time online, or depending on their age, is appropriate. I think some people choose not to allow them to play only on the weekends and not during the week. I think that can be one way to limit. The problem with that is you don't want to, I think I write about this somewhere, you don't want to create like a model where they want it too badly. It's kind of like the birthday parties. If you've gone to birthday parties with young kids and there's always one kid who goes straight for the candy and the cake and eats it. And we all know as parents that that's the kid that comes from the family that isn't allowed to have candy and cake. So the minute that they're let out, they're just shoving their faces, and the rest of their kids are having like one bite. That model is also the same for the device. If you restrict a lot, then your kids want it. If it becomes something that then, they get a little bit of in moderation, they crave it less. So there's that balance with the fact that, of course, there should be restrictions for younger kids. The best way I have found to restrict is actually to replace, meaning that if your kids are going to school and then after school they're playing a sport, or they're doing art, or they're doing music, and they're doing activities, and then they're doing dinner, then perhaps allowing them to play for an hour or 2 hours after dinner is appropriate. Another way to limit screen time is to use sort of what's called a positive reinforcement model in psychology and psychiatry. And that's where once you've practiced piano and you've done your homework and you've had dinner and you've taken your shower, then you can have screen time. So basically it's an eternal reward. If you don't get to it, if you're too busy with other things and you don't get to it, then you don't get that, but that's okay. There's no punishment. It's really important to not use the devices as punishment. Right now, I think most parents in America feel that the only thing they've got is to take the phone away. The problem is the punishment needs to fit the crime. You can take your kid's phone away for misusing their phone, but you maybe shouldn't take their phone away for not making their bed. Like, that needs to be sort of connected. Anyway, my thoughts on restrictions are doing other activities, leaving it till the end. For younger kids, maybe waiting till the weekends, and then being thoughtful, saying you can be online a lot more if you're using it for educational apps. All the educational apps are for little kids. So what little kids are doing online, I forget, at one point it was like 75 or 80% of the educational apps on the App Store were like for kids under 8 or something. So little kids, there's a lot of opportunities for that kind of educational apps too. So I don't know if I've actually answered that or not, but I'm trying.
The questions are coming in fast and furious.
What about doing more? Oh, here they are.
Can you see them? So Andrea asks thoughts about using electronics as rewards or as incentives.
I do want to wait. I have Deborah Goldstein. I like this question. I just want to answer it quickly. How to help older kids get off in order to get their work done. There's actually some very cool apps for that. My favorite one, I think it's called Forest. And you put it on your desktop, and you get to control. This is about self-regulation. I was talking about how to self-regulate and learn for your kids to self-regulate. So you decide what you want to restrict. However, it doesn't really restrict. So if you're doing your work and you want to go to YouTube, you'll get this like little tree that comes up that died. You can go to YouTube if you want, but the tree is dying. And for every hour that you set that you actually do not go on the sites you don't want to, you get a virtual tree. And then after you get an X number of virtual trees, the company actually plants a real tree for you. So that's my favorite like hack for high schoolers and college kids about trying to set up your own kind of to self-regulate and set up your own limitations. What are your suggestions about dealing with middle schoolers who lose sleep because they stay up with screens, sometimes sneaking the screens? Yeah. In terms of sneaking the screens, that's why if your kids are sneaking screens, then what you need to do is have a place where all the screens, including your own screens, go to bed, so that everyone in the family is putting their screens in sort of one place. That's one thing. It's always close to bedtime. I know. Okay, so one of the things, this is a hard, the bedtime one's a hard one for me because I'm not convinced with sort of the research out there. the research has always been that you're supposed to be off your devices for like an hour or something before you go to bed. That research is not super convincing. If it's a way to get your kids off the devices, yay, go for it. But if you're asking me about how good that research is, it's medium. I think it's very specific. I would say for kids with ADHD, I like to give them transitional time. So for kids for ADHD, trying to get your kids off, like having some transitional time is really helpful in terms of getting them off before bed. The other thing that's really important, which I didn't mention for ADHD kids, is the reminders. Is when you're trying to get your kids off the devices is to give them like little reminders. The other thing about that is, as a parent, is to understand what they're doing online. So if you have a kid with ADHD and you tell them they have to get off in 5 minutes, and then you come into their room and you pull it away from them, and they're in the middle of this game that they've been playing for an hour or 2 hours, and you've now killed them and they've now died and they've lost all of their lives or whatever, like that's catastrophic, in quotation marks. However, if you say to your child, when is this level over, or can you quit at the next level, they can often feel very validated that you understand what they're playing. And at the end of the day, you don't really care if they're on it for an extra 10 minutes. That's not really the point. The point is to get them off of it. So understanding what your kids are doing online and helping them find a good stopping point, it's helpful. It's also just a helpful skill for ADHD kids, trying to, in terms of self-regulation, understanding, I know I need to go to bed, I need to get through this level, but in 10 minutes, or when I die 3 times or whatever, I'll get off. So that part, the collaborative, what I find at bedtime is, especially with kids with ADHD, the more collaboration you have, the better. I know it doesn't always work, but like it's, what we're aspiring to. Okay. What if they're doing more learning, creating interesting things at the expense of homework, or as something they can't self-restrict? Oh, that's a great question. Because we really want them to be doing learning, creative, and interesting things online. I mean, that's our goal. Yeah, I don't blame them for that, because they're probably doing something more productive than their homework, but they still need to get their homework done. So this is a challenge for everybody, of course, but it's going to be a bigger challenge for kids with ADHD who really don't like to focus on things. That's when I do the whole ADHD thing. That's where I'm like, all right, we're going to set a timer and you're going to sit here and do homework for 30 minutes. I'm very big into timers with kids with ADHD. I mean, I'm big into timers for everyone. But I'm big into timers for kids with ADHD. I think it's really helpful for them to be knowing they have to sit there for 20 or 30 minutes and get the reminders on the, on the timer. And I think that the rewards can also be to do the interesting creative thing online, right? I mean, that's a great reward. You can go back to your interesting creative thing, but first you got to give me 30 minutes of homework or 2 hours of homework, depending on the age and the homework, but using timers and collaborating with them. This is a big thing. You're trying to teach your kids, especially your kids with ADHD, about self-regulation. So that means you say to your daughter who's doing this creative thing online, what do you think? Do you want to go to school without your homework being done? And she's like, no, it's so boring. I don't want to sit down and do it. And then the two of you collaborate. All right, you'll do 30 minutes or an hour timer, and then you'll go do your fun thing online. It really does work to collaborate with them sometimes. Oh, yes, Forrest. I use it when I'm working. Okay, is there any other questions that I haven't answered? How can you help older? Electronics for incentives. My thoughts on using electronics for incentives is that that's such a slippery slope, but it's like often all we've got, to be totally honest with you. I'd like to say don't use them for incentives, but I'm being real here. I think that it's probably it's often the most powerful incentives. So your problem with the using the phone or the iPad or whatever as an incentive is the opposite, is the negative reinforcement piece. What you want to try to do, if you're going to use any of it as an incentive, is to use a positive reinforcement model, which means that if you do something, you earn sort of the ability to do it, not we're taking it away if you don't do this. You understand the difference? Like, and all the research shows that negative reinforcement doesn't work. Although we all do it, we all get frustrated and take the stuff away. It doesn't work. So if you're going to use it, use the device, you need to use it as an incentive, where the worst case scenario is they don't get it, but there's never a scenario where they lose it. Instead, they can kind of earn it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Age group for each day. Okay, am I covering? Do you have guidelines per age group? Not really, but you guys don't want to know the hours that they're showing the kids are online, that they're really showing the kids are online from 9 to 11 hours a day, no joke. 11 hours is usually, that's when they put into place. If you count multitasking, so if you count being on your phone and your computer double, then kids are on their devices over 11 hours a day. It's kind of insane. One you missed. What about if they're doing something okay? Yes, Forrest. Oh, did I say that wrong? I may have used said negative reinforcement wrong. I think you meant negative punishment, removing a stimulus to reduce the future likelihood. Yes, I think I said that wrong. Thank you for correcting me on that. Increase the future likelihood of behavior. Not sure. What I'm really saying is don't take the phone away. What I'm saying is give them the phone or the device that let them earn it, is what I'm trying to say. I apologize if I didn't say it right.
Yeah, for young kids, we say as soon as you do X, you get Y.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, that paradigm tends to work better than if you don't do, I'm going to take away whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really true for the phone. But I will say, try not to take away the phone or the iPad when you get angry or rageful. And for whatever reason, I'm sure that we all do it and it all happens to us, but it's really confusing to kids because it really, doesn't make sense. You should be taking the phone away or the iPad away when they misuse that privilege, not when they do something completely different.
Yeah, the punishment should be related to the crime.
Right. It's super hard because I think that most parents feel that the only thing they've got is the iPad or the phone or whatever to take away. It doesn't feel like that now that today in 2023 we have a lot of leverage, but I think that's where you have to be creative about what other consequence there could be, because taking away the phone just doesn't. It ends up becoming this very hot button issue where kids are really reactive, especially kids with ADHD. So any talk, they get very impulsive and react, and the mood dysregulation's all over the place. And that's not the goal.
It doesn't increase self-regulation.
It doesn't increase self-regulation when the parents randomly take the phone away. Even though I get it, we all get it. It just doesn't help.
Well, you use the word random. I think the issue is that to kids, it feels random.
Right.
And they really don't feel understood and they don't feel like the parent has any sense of what their experience is like. So,
Yeah.
So I love
Yeah.
that we're talking about collaborative problem solving because that's really so important, especially with ADHD kids. So they feel like they are heard and they feel like they have some ability to explain. And also it helps them if they process out loud to maybe understand why there's that resistance or why there's that difficulty. So
100%. And it's even more true with technology because technology is a place where they often feel misunderstood. It's also a place for them to have mastery. So they often know, even the little ones know more than us. So I would really encourage your kids to teach you, like all these things I've mentioned today, I would encourage you to get your kids to teach you, even if you have young kids, whatever it is, whether it's how to use Zoom, whether it's how to use Candy Crush, get them to teach you how to use what they're doing online because they're really good at it. And it really helps with self-confidence and collaboration that you need them to understand how to do this. I think somebody is raising their hand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's me. It's interesting, the research you showed in the beginning of the slide about the control over their image led to increased self-confidence and self-worth and all that. Well, translating that into the collaborative problem solving, giving them control over, feeling of control over their lives and how they're using their time gives them a sense of self-confidence and self-worth and agency.
Yeah, this is the perfect topic to be collaborative because they know so much about it and they're so much often more intuitive than their parents in terms of learning and problem solving online that they're often really good guides. And they often actually, the older ones, once you get into older middle school, ask them about like resilience. I mean, I ask older kids about younger kids. They'll often have lots of opinions about and things you haven't even thought about because again, most of us are digital immigrants. But there's a lot of opportunity for kids to feel good about themselves and to collaborate in this particular field. And ADHD kids who are really good at hyper-focusing are often really very intuitive and very good at problem solving online.
So Jodi, we have one more question, and I think we're going to have to stop there because it's just about 9:15. But Jen wrote that lately her child uses his iPad as a means to socialize. He talks, he plays the same game together with multiple friends. And when he doesn't get to use the iPad, he literally feels like he's missing out.
Yeah.
And this is really, it's more of a comment. It's what Jen is noticing.
Yeah, Jen, I agree. I think this is one place, as I was saying, where the pandemic's had a huge impact. It is how kids interact. It's become part of social life for kids to play games together. And in some ways, yes, Roblox, that is actually someone else has added, we have the same issue with Roblox on our iPad. Yeah, and the issue is that I know that these are younger kids and we don't want them on their devices all the time, but depending on where you live, like where it's not super, if you don't live in an environment, I live in Manhattan, where kids are like outside playing together, the best way for them to connect often, especially after school and on the weekends, is on playing games together. So they do feel alone. I know this is where you need to sort of engage them in real life, right? When they're not on Roblox, they can be playing something, real or with you. The flip side to that is that it's become a really wonderful way to collaborate and to hang out. Kids now do their homework together again, because you can both be on Zoom or on Discord and doing homework together. And then when they're done, they can play games together. So it is a wonderful way to collaborate. It's also if you've got kids with poor social skills or impulsive, sometimes this is a great way to make friends. I often, when I see a child in my practice that's having trouble socially, I will ask them if any of their friends are playing games and try to get them to connect online to play games, because sometimes it's like a nice way to connect, and then try to get them to connect in real life. But I know the problem with all the games being online is that you have to be online all the time. I mean, this is where we are right now, is that it's really hard to get offline. And I would argue that playing Roblox with your friends in general is a pretty good thing to do, right? Like you're interacting and talking and playing. I know it shouldn't replace real life play, but as we all know, you can't have real life play all the time. So yeah, I know it's a challenge for all of this. It's a big issue with Roblox, though I do like Roblox. Yeah, so this is part of, I also would suggest that you ask your kids if they think they're on their devices too much. Don't say you're going to take away their devices, just get their opinions, because I think they're often pretty self-reflective.
All right, we're gonna stop there. But Jodi, it feels like we could have you, speak for hours and hours. We could do a whole workshop. Thank you so very much for coming and for all your words of wisdom. For anybody who's here, if you want to review anything, we're going to post the talk, including the slides, online, www.bergencountychad.com. You can go to our website. And if you have any questions for Jodi, you can reach out to her. Her information is at the beginning and the end.
Yeah, beginning and the end of the presentation.
So you'll be able to get in touch with her. And she really tries to respond to people.
It might be a little slow, but I try.
A little slow, but her heart's in the right place. Absolutely.
I went to great attention. Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate it.
All for coming, and we hope to see you at one of our support groups or next month when Nikki talks about getting ready for summer. Have a great day.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you
so much, Jodi.
Thank you.
So we have to